Thank you, Chairman Lowenthal, and thank you for the opportunity to join you all today. It's such a pleasure to see so many New Mexicans here today, many friends and colleagues and folks who I've actually worked with on climate for many years. So really, thank you so much for being here today and for inviting me to be a part of this subcommittee hearing. So, we've heard a lot today about what's happening with our energy economy, and New Mexico is an oil and gas state. It's also a science and technology state, and it is a climate action state. And I want to say that I am so proud that our governor has been at the forefront of helping to address climate change. As was mentioned, she was in Glasgow the last couple of weeks ago to announce our state's big announcements on climate action. And it was one of her first actions upon taking office as the governor. Was her third executive order was to sign a climate action order. So our state has managed to both walk the tightrope of being an energy producing state, as well as being one of the forefront and leading states in climate action. But I think it's important to really talk about how the oil and gas industry operates and how that ties into the local economies as well as the state budget of New Mexico. And I know there's been a lot of discussion about that, but there's also been a lot of misinformation shared today in this hearing. And so I want to kind of correct some of that. So New Mexico is home to two large oil and gas basins and some other smaller ones, but the San Juan Basin up in the north side of the state and the Permian Basin, which we share with Texas. And the first thing that I really want to say is that oil is booming right now. There's been a lot of things said today, and I hear this in energy hearings a lot, that somehow American competitiveness has been compromised by climate policies, and that is just false. That is patently false and untrue. Our oil and gas production is driven largely by global commodity prices. So in New Mexico, as has been discussed, as the price of oil goes high, production goes up, our revenues go up, we collect those revenues, there's more profits coming into industry, and production goes up. When prices go low, or in the cases they did last year, production goes down, wells get shut down, development of wells goes down, and leases do not get developed. So the idea that somehow climate policies are driving production and that American competitiveness is suffering from our climate policies is not true. Our world is facing a global climate crisis. We are literally at a tipping point. The IPCC report that was released a few months ago basically told us that if we do not take action globally across every sector of our society on every continent of this planet to cut carbon emissions, we will cross a tipping point that will affect every community on this planet. So that means we have to address climate change on our public lands. We have to address climate change in all of our industries. We have to address it in our electricity sector, in our oil and gas sector. We have to address it in our transportation sector. We don't have a choice at this point because our planet is facing a global tipping point. And so that is why it's so crucial that we look at every possible option in order in the short term to address the crisis of emissions so that we do not cross that tipping point. We have to also address the impacts of climate change that we're already experiencing, drought, fires, and all the things that have been discussed here today. And we have to ensure the long-term economic security of our communities, and in a place like New Mexico that is so dependent on those revenues, that we diversify our economy so that our state is not on this endless roller coaster of not being able to control its own destiny. We have to do all three of those things. We can't pick or choose because the crisis is already here. So addressing the emissions, especially from oil and gas, and putting our state on the path to a just transition is crucial not only to our planet and doing our part as a climate action state, but also to the security and the well-being and the justice and the equity and the sustainability of our local communities. Because our communities are dependent on those jobs. Our communities are dependent on that local economic development, and our state is dependent on those revenues. So with that, I know we've already had a lot of discussion this morning about this in this hearing, but I'd love to hear from Senator Hamblin a bit more. I know you are working on this not only in your professional life, but also as a state legislator. Can you please talk to us some more, both how do you see the long-term diversification of our economy? What are the major sectors that we can be moving in? And then how do we ground that work in really community-based economic development so that we're empowering communities to control their own destinies and their own futures as they're imagining new local economies?
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative. It's good to see your face on here today, and thank you for the work that you're doing on behalf of New Mexico. And I've mentioned this before in terms of diversifying our economy, and we have these opportunities. We've talked about outdoor recreation. We've talked about creating new industries. And one of the things that I've been talking about specifically is really moving more toward renewable energy and providing opportunities for New Mexicans who are working in the oil fields, who have worked on the oil and gas, who've done this for decades. That they have jobs that make either equal to or more than what they're making right now. And I think that's our responsibility as legislators to make sure that those industries exist, that they are created, and that there are no obstacles to make sure that we do that. But I also feel that it's really important, as you and I both know, how rural New Mexico is and how we have populations that are getting ignored in this conversation about climate change and about diversifying our economy and about making sure that our rural communities thrive. And so I feel that it's really important that we focus those new industries in those communities so that they can flourish just as much as Albuquerque or Las Cruces or Santa Fe. And so I think that that's really where we have to have those conversations to make sure that we're doing that and make sure that those communities have a voice in that conversation.
Thank you, Senator. And I know I'm out of time, but I just want to say, this is such a vital, vital conversation. It's about ensuring the long-term security of our communities. And actually, this is why we are fighting to pass the Build Back Better Act here in Congress so that we can infuse our communities with money and resources and the infrastructure bill that we just passed so that we can do that economic diversification and invest in our communities and their future. So I want to thank all of our witnesses and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time, and I yield back.